Welcome to this guide on the Photoshop task. Today we're going to be looking at how we can manipulate images to enhance them, how we can use common tools in Photoshop, transformations, rotations, what layers are and how we can use these effectively. We're going to look at image filters and image effects. And finally we're going to look at how we can export images in a variety of different formats. Now the task surrounds an idiom, the phrase being, "It's raining cats and dogs." So what I want to try and do is take that phrase, "It's raining cats and dogs," and visualize it. So I need some kind of rainy day picture and some cats and some dogs that are falling from the sky as if it were rain. Well, let's find out how we can do that. The first job is to have a bank of pictures that we can use. I'm going to need some cats, I'm going to need some dogs, and then finally I'm going to need some kind of background. Now I've produced a folder here and I've called it Original Pictures, and in there I've downloaded some pictures that I want to use. A background, a couple of pictures of cats taken from the internet, and I've got 4 pictures of dogs here from the real world. When we're using Photoshop, there is a bit of a difference between having a picture on a white background and having a real world picture. And we're going to look at the ways in which we can essentially take that picture out and place it on our background. It is a little bit trickier when it's not on a white background, but it's a good thing to see how to do as the principles are the same. And so in this guide, we'll look at both. Well, your first job is to download a background picture and some cats and some dogs. I'm going to start with looking for a rainy day image. I've typed rainy day. I'm going to look at the images that Google throws up. And as I've previously downloaded, this particular picture here was the one that I'd settled for. It shows me a woman walking with an umbrella on what is clearly a rainy day. And that would be a good background to use. To get that picture, I'm just going to find the greatest quality one that I can, and I'm simply going to save my image somewhere onto the desktop. You want to do exactly the same process for your dog pictures and for your cat pictures. You might want to simply put in the phrase white background after you're looking for your dog and cat pictures, and this will make the task a little bit easier. But like previously stated, if it's a real world picture, no problem at all, simply download them. So eventually, have a folder called Original Pictures with a variety of pictures that you're going to use, of which one is a background for the next task. So let's take a look at the task that we want to do. Well, the very first task that I'm looking for is to have a look at our background image and just edit it in the way that I want to. So I'm going to open up Photoshop, and when Photoshop opens, I'm going to find the background picture that I've already downloaded. So I'm going to go File and Open to the area where I saved it, in this case on my desktop, and I'm going to use my background picture. And so this is my picture here. Now I like the picture, but what I think I want to do is actually make the picture black and white. So with my picture, I'm going to choose Image. I'm going to go to my adjustments, and I'm going to change my vibrance. I'm going to move my saturation levels down all the way to the bottom, -100, and I've got a black and white photo. Now, I might settle for that, but actually, I think I want to keep a little bit of colour. And looking at that, it might be quite nice to keep the umbrella coloured, but keep everything else black and white. So I'm going to undo that step. What I now want to do is actually just try and select this umbrella to keep the colour in, but everything else to go black and white. And in my bar, I can click on Select Inverse. This has now selected everything that isn't in this box. And again, like I did before, I can simply choose my image adjustments, my vibrance, and take my number down to 100. Now my box has retained the colour, but the background has gone to black and white. Well, again, if we look closely, it's not a brilliant job because my rectangle has still got bits of colour. There's a bit of leaf and tree here that retains its colour, and I don't want that. It doesn't look brilliant. However, there is a slightly better way that we can do this. Instead, what I'm going to use is a slightly different tool. I'm going to use my Lasso tool. And the Lasso tool allows me to freehand draw what I want to keep. Now there are other tools that we can use, but we're going to focus on this one at the moment. And again, I've done that roughly, which makes it a little bit neater. But let's try and get it as accurately as we can. I'm going to zoom in on my picture a little bit. I can either do that down the bottom here and change my percentages. So I'm going to move into about 300%. And I'm just going to move to the area that I want to focus on. And here's the umbrella. So again, with my Lasso tool, I'm going to take my time and try and get as much of the umbrella as accurately as I can selected. Now, the slower and the more careful I am, the better the end result will be. And I've gone a little bit quick and I've missed a little bit here and there, but generally speaking, that's not a bad job. And then the process is the same. I'm going to inverse using Photoshop, so it's now selecting everything that isn't within this lasso. And I'm going to adjust my image with the vibrance, and I'm going to take it down to -100. Now I'm happy with that. I'm going to zoom back out. And for me, this is now going to be my background picture, which I'm very pleased with. I've got my colour, but everything else is black. At this point, I'm going to save my image. I'm going to save as, and on my desktop or wherever I'm saving in my area, I've made a new folder called Edited Pictures. And I'm now going to call this my background rainy day, where I originally had called it my original. I'm now going to call it edited. I could give it a different name, a name that says coloured umbrella. However you name it, just so it's obvious that it's something you can access later. I'm still working on this, so I'm going to make it a Photoshop file when I go for my save. At this point, I'm happy with where my background is, so I'm going to close it down. So now we've sorted out the background, I'm going to edit a couple of pictures of my cats and dogs. And I'm going to start with a picture of a cat on a white background. Having a white background makes it significantly easier. And I'll show you why. What I want to do is I want to take the picture of this cat and place it on the new background that I've just created. Well, what I could do is I could open up my newly exported picture and I could simply select my cat, copy it and paste it onto my background. However, clearly that white background of that picture of the cat is really interfering with the visual appeal of the picture, let alone the scale and proportion of the cat. So simply copying and pasting isn't the way forward. What we need to do is remove parts of the image that we're not after. Well, I'm going to start initially by simply grabbing the smallest section of the picture that I need to use. So I've used my selector tool and I'm going to copy that part of the image. I'm now going to make a new file, but I'm going to make sure that I have my background as transparent. And that's a really important step. Now when I paste that image in, it looks pretty much identical to how it did before. However, what I can now do with my new image is right click and select my magic wand tool. If I use my magic wand tool to now select some of the white image and press delete, I'll notice that now my cat has simply got the outline of itself. There is no white background. We're not quite finished, but again, to simply have pasted now by selecting my image and copying it and pasting onto my background, again, far from complete, but the outline is suddenly very good. I haven't got that messy white background. Now, I'm not going to save any of this, I've got lots to do yet, but I will go back to the cat, which now has this black and white checkered background. This means there is no background. I'm going to save this as cat edited 1, and I'm going to save it in my edited pictures. And again, I'm going to keep it as a Photoshop file. Now I'm going to show you one more. For your picture, it's raining cats and dogs. I think you're going to need 3-4 different animals at least. But I'll show you one which is a little bit harder, but we can look at. I'm going to open up a picture, a real world picture of my dog. And in fact, this is my dog Rio. And when she was a puppy, so just as before, I want to select the smallest part of that image which I need, and I want to copy it. And I'm going to make a new file, which again I must make sure has a background content as transparent. I'm going to paste it in, and then I can not worry about my original picture. Well, here's the problem. Previously, with the white background, I could right click, choose magic wand, and select things. And certain things would be deleted. But you'll notice in doing this, it's a little messier. It's not quite accurate. There's bits that are being left, there's bits that aren't being taken out. Well, there's 2 ways around this. The first is to use the magic wand as often as you can on the small sections. And again, zooming in makes the job a little bit easier. We can zoom to certain parts and we know that this is not needed, and this is not needed, and this is not needed, etc., etc. There is a slightly quicker way. We can use our Lasso tool to select slightly larger sections to delete out. Now we can go into an incredible amount of detail. For example, here, there's a real disparity between the black of my dog and the brown carpet she's on. So the computer's pretty good at picking out the difference. But if I really zoom into this in real detail, I can actually get down to the pixel layers. And again, I can actually go as far as to pick individual pixels to delete. I might find that the magic wand in certain areas is very good, but in other areas is less so. I might find I want to use my Lasso tool. In doing so, I can go freehand and delete certain bits that don't fit the pattern. This comes down to a case of taking your time, zooming in to as much detail as you can, deleting as many of the parts of a picture that you don't want as possible. To do it properly, you're going to need to invest. It's really important you try to take out as many of the inaccuracies in the picture as you can. Again, I save my picture and I'm going to put it now in my new edited picture folder, and I'm going to give it a name, Rio 1, edited, as Rio is the dog's name, and I'm going to keep it as Photoshop. At this stage, hopefully you've managed to edit and manipulate a background image and clean up a variety of dog and cat images so we can now paste and manipulate onto a single picture. First of all, I'm going to open up my edited background. Now you'll notice that actually it's been placed within a layer and it's called background. What I want to do is to begin to add more layers. I want to put some more pictures on top of this background. So I'm going to open up a different picture. I'm going to open up my original edited cat. It's in a different file. There's 2 tabs at the top. What I want to do in essence is take this picture and place it onto this picture. We do that by selecting the entire image and copying it. I then go to my background and I can paste. You'll notice at this point I've got a new layer. Now I might want to change the layer's name. I can double click it and call it whatever I need to. In this case, cat 1. I now want to go to my move tool, and this will allow me to move my cat around. But clearly, I've got a bit of a problem. This cat is far too big for this picture. So what I want to do is scale the picture. I want to make this cat significantly smaller. I can do that by going to my Edit button, going to Transform, and clicking on Scale. At this point, my picture of my cat has been chosen. And at the top, I've got a selection of tools, of which 2 stand for width and height, and they're given as a percentage. Now, I'm happy with the ratio of the cat. In other words, that cat is a certain height and a certain width, and I want to keep that proportion. So I can press the button in between the W and the H to maintain my aspect ratio. At this point, I can choose a different width. Now I think my cat is about 10 times wider than it should be. So rather than having 100% width, I want to make that about 10 times smaller. Now, actually, having done that, it looks a tiny bit too small for me. So maybe I'll increase the number to 12%. When I'm happy with that, I can hit enter. And I can move my cat and exactly the same principle. I might open my edited picture of my dog. Again, selecting the whole image and copying it, going into my final template and pasting. And again, I've now got a new layer. I'm going to call this one Rio 1. And again, my scale's off. So I might go and transform the scale of my dog. Again, I want to keep the proportions. Maybe I only want it about 20% as big. And I can move it to a place of my choosing and apply any changes. Well, at this point, I'm beginning to get my dogs and cats placed into my final picture. It might be the case that actually I want to manipulate these just a little bit further. So perhaps I actually want to have one of my layers, maybe the cat layer, and I want the image to be changed a little bit. Perhaps I want to rotate it slightly. I can click the rotate button and I can have this particular cat, maybe such as this, falling upside down. And again, I can move my layer to wherever I feel appropriate. Now there's a huge variety of tools that you can use through your Photoshop project. Based on the layers that you've got, transformations, rotations, whatever it is that you feel appropriate. We can go to the edit menu to transform a variety of scales, rotations, perspectives. We could adjust the images based on their vibrance of colours, their colour balance. We could replace given colours with other colours. A huge variety of choices which would be wise for you to have a look at and have a play with. There's even filters on Photoshop, and these can be very, very, very subtle to quite serious. For example, the mosaic could really blur out my particular image, and that would vary. Maybe I'm not enjoying the picture of my dog, and so I'll pixelate it. In this example, I don't think it looks great, but the point being, have a play with the tools available. Now at this point, if I'm happy with my final image, my last task is to save it appropriately. Well, first of all, I'm happy with this image. So I'm going to save as, and I'm going to call it my final image. I'm going to keep it as Photoshop. The reason I've done that, if I need to come back to it and change it, I still can. For example, I really don't like the positioning of the dog layer. So I can select the dog layer and move the dog to a more appropriate place. However, I can also save my image in my given folder, but rather than as Photoshop, as a variety of different formats. And I'm going to choose as my second format a JPEG format. I'm going to call it final image, but this time I'm going to call it final image JPEG, and I'm going to hit save. I'm going to have my quality as high as it goes. If I now close this down and now open up that newly saved image, the final image JPEG, you'll notice I no longer have my layers. I'm unable to change any specific layer. Well, that's the basics of Photoshop. Your task is to design your idiom of "It's raining cats and dogs." Go through the steps by step, find your photos, edit and manipulate, and end up with a final picture that expresses "It's raining cats and dogs," and have some fun with it. Thank you very much.